Children.
Here, I got 3 of these for you.
Those are for me?
Yeah.
What a nice guy.
Yeah.
Last time Leroy was here last year, he talked to us about, I think, the woman in blue that was out east of town. So I asked him if he could come up with the lady in black. No. I asked him if he could bring up some more stuff like that. It seemed like we all enjoyed it. So Deacon Leroy Behnke, my cohort at St. Joseph's Church, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dad. I really am very honored to be here, and I'm really glad that the man that people call Shorty isn't here. He's a guy I met last week at a church up in Lubbock. I'd been invited by the pastor up there to preach a sermon, so I did, and I gave it the best I had. I really did. Anyway, after the service, I was at the door, standing next to the pastor, greeting a line of people as they left, when, much to my surprise, this little man comes up to me and gets all tippy-toe and goes like this. He says, "You talk too long and too loud." And then he walks on out the door. Well, sure enough, about a minute later, there he is again, all puffed up. "You're the worst preacher we ever had," he says to me, and walks away. And wouldn't you know, a third time he comes up and he says, "I hope you never come back here again." And I turned to the pastor and I said, "Who is that guy that's talking to me like that?" And the pastor says, "Oh, that's just old Shorty. Don't worry about what he says. He just repeats what he hears everybody else say." Be that as it may, here I am. And if it turns out I talk too loud and too long and too monotonously, blame Darius. He's the one who has to be here. Mark, if you'll pass out that little handout, there's a little visual aid. For those of us that don't have cell phones and don't know how to do PowerPoint or anything else. And you'll see on the top, the title of this little chat is Pink Higgins and the Real Deal Wild West. What I'm calling the real deal Wild West, if you look up here in the corner, the yellow box, the 6 counties of West Texas, these 6 Texas counties is what I'm calling the real deal Wild West. Lubbock, Crosby, Dickens, Lynn, Garza, and Kent. There's no highfalutin, rootin', tootin', Wild West theme park razzmatazz here. You know that. You know where we live. But that's all Hollywood's turf. If you want the fictional Old West, just watch a movie with the Duke playing Big Jake McCandless. But if you want a taste of the true West, you can savor the real deal Wild West where you live, including a slice of it that's located just 30 miles, almost practically due east as the crow flies, from right where we're sitting right now. You see, this land was home to John Colhoun Pickney Higgins, better known to those who knew him as Pink Higgins. And Pink Higgins is a genuine, archetypal Western hero. The real deal Wild West just doesn't get any more authentic than his life story. And he lived his last years right here, where the White River Arroyo crosses the Garza-Kent County line. If you look right there where the Crosby, Garza, Kent, and Dickens all come together, and you can kind of see a little blotch there that's White River Lake, and then the White River, the Arroyo, comes out down there to come into the Salt branch of the Brazos. And right where the White River crosses over from the Garza into the Kent County line, that's where Higgins lived. Now and that's just like I said, just 30 miles, right out there. We all know that John Duke Wayne created a memorable cowboy character, and that's fine. But I'm sorry to say that far too few of us know that John Pink Higgins did it too. I'm especially sorry since the Duke's character was fictional and Pink's life was the real deal. Pink Higgins was, in actuality, the persona that John Wayne often portrayed in his movies. Pink was a quiet, but witty, rough but gentle, tough but fair, independent but friendly, gunslinging but Bible reading. He read it all the way through, cover to cover, 3 times. Range riding but family loving, man of America's Wild West. Although Pink's mortal remains are at rest at the cemetery in Spur, this cowboy's life was anything but restful. That's a picture of Pink Higgins, probably in his late 50s, maybe early 60s. And he should have died anything but a restful, natural death. Pink Higgins fought hostile Indians, Comanches, wild Comanches. He hunted and dealt with rustlers. He punched wild cattle himself. He helped vigilance committees dispense what they call frontier justice. And he was at the center of a legendary Texas feud, the bloody Horrell-Higgins feud down in and around Lampasas. And that's where he lived before moving to these parts in 1899 to work as a range rider for the Spur Ranch over in Dickens County. But his death came very restfully, very quietly. He's pictured here standing in front of his house, a board and batten building, and what he called the Catfish Ranch. As you may know, the White River is called Catfish Creek along in those parts as well. And his ranch was right on the side of the Catfish Creek. On December 18th, 1913, he was building a fire at his ranch house, this ranch house, right there in Kent County, and he died of a heart attack. I can take you to the ruins of that house sometime if you want to go. It's ruins. Unfortunately, it's going to fall over completely one of these days. Yes, indeed, his death was far more peaceful than his life had been. He killed at least 14 men. That's more than Wyatt Earp, more than Doc Holliday, way more than Billy the Kid. Once, while looking at an indictment stating he had killed those 14 scoundrels, Higgins said, "I didn't kill all them men. But then again, I got some that wasn't on the bill, so I guess it about evens up." Yep, the real deal. But Pink Higgins didn't consider himself a gunfighter in the accepted sense. Not by any means. He just didn't take kindly to threats or to theft or disparaging words spoken about his family, his friends, or himself. Like it says up here, he believed right was right, and he killed 14 men to prove it. This was a lawless place. The last man Higgins killed was J. William Bill Standifer. This photo down here of the group of Texas cattlemen. Standifer is, as it says, on the left in the back row. Stories differ as to why Higgins and Standifer shot it out. They once were friends. Even his family was never quite sure why Higgins and Standifer fell out. The most plausible story says that after Higgins was hired to protect the interests of the Espuela Land and Cattle Company Limited, the original owner of the Spur Ranch, that Higgins caught Standifer and a fellow named Bill McComas showing too much interest in cattle that weren't theirs. And Higgins warned them to watch it. Standifer made threats in return, backed up by McComas, and Higgins had to stay on high alert. Standifer was not known to be interested in face-to-face confrontations. He also knew of Higgins' reputation with a gun. Higgins carried a .44, and the stories were that he wasn't very fast with it, but he was deadly accurate. His preferred weapon, however, was originally in 1873, but then ultimately in 1894, Winchester. And sure enough, Standifer tried several times to ambush Higgins, but old Pink was apparently a very wary man, and none of Standifer's tricks worked. It seems that Pink Higgins had an uncanny sixth sense. Many times he would suddenly change the way he was heading home because he felt he shouldn't go down a certain trail. And invariably, when it was checked out, there'd be evidence that someone had been waiting there to ambush him. And he's right over there. No one knew how Higgins knew it. He'd just know. And it saved his life many times. But the day came when Higgins said he couldn't live, quote unquote, holed up like a rat any longer. He rarely had a light on in his home at night, and he stayed away from windows. He never took his eyes off people approaching him from a distance until he was sure of their identity. And the pressure was finally too much. Friends vowed that Higgins never wanted to fight Standifer and made every effort to avoid it, but enough was enough. So one fateful October morning, just a couple weeks from now, when Higgins saw Standifer in the distance riding towards the Higgins home, Pink saddled up his favorite horse named Sandy, stuck his Winchester in the boot, and rode out to meet the man. This is a quote. This is how Higgins explained what happened next. I was sure he wouldn't get off his horse on my side, but would try to use his horse for protection. So I made up my mind to keep my eye on his left foot. And the minute that foot left the stirrup, I would get off and go for my gun. When we were less than 100 yards apart and getting closer every step our horses took, he slipped her out and off I went. My rifle sort of hung in the saddle scabbard, and as I got out, Standifer shot, hitting my horse. Old Sandy jumped against me and made me shoot wild. I always hated to lose the first shot. Standifer was shooting, but he was jumping around like a Comanche, and his shots were going wild. He was sideways to me, and so I knew I had to shoot mighty accurate to get him. I knew he couldn't do any good with his gun until he stopped jumping. So I dropped on my knee, trying to get a bead on him, and when he slowed down, I let him have it. I knew I'd got him when the dust flew out of his sleeve above the elbow, and he started to buckle. He dropped his gun into the crook of his other arm and tried to trot off. I called to him saying if he'd had enough, I wouldn't shoot again and would come to him. But he fell face forward, his feet flopped up, and he didn't speak. I was afraid to go to him, fearing he was playing possum after being shot. So I got on my horse and started home. My horse died when I got there, so I got another horse and rode to a telephone. Told the sheriff at Claremont I thought I'd killed Standifer. The sheriff said if I wasn't sure, I'd better go back and finish it. The Wild West, right there. Pink Higgins was never indicted for that killing. And Standifer was buried close to where he fell in a place now called Standifer Thicket. Standifer Thicket is that last picture down there. And we can stop by there. If y'all want to go see the house, we'll stop by there and go up onto the grave because that's where it was. That grave marker was placed there in 1957. They got the date wrong. The actual date of the shootout was October 4th. There's. Happy birthday. And it's about, the thicket is about a mile northeast of Higgins's little ranch house. So that's how far he had ridden out and where they had the gunfight. Well, there's a lot more I can say about Pink Higgins. I promise you that. But there's also a lot of other real deal Wild West stories about where we live. The legendary Coronado expedition. Everybody says they were out looking for 7 cities of gold. No, they weren't. If they had found 7 cities of gold, they would have been happy, but they had other things on their mind. There's a story about the hackberry tree on Catfish Creek. Killer Jim Miller, a Methodist deacon, killed his first person when he was 8. His grandfather. The story of Stampede Mesa, and some say right out there, right at the north end of White River Lake, Stampede Mesa, and some say that's what was the inspiration for Ghost Riders in the Sky. Buried ink in gold. Maybe $250, $500 million worth of gold right down there in Stonewall County, outside of Aspermont. The fact that Llano Estacado does not mean staked plains. Doesn't mean that. Or the lost Nolan expedition, the Buffalo Soldiers that the Comanches led all around up here, and that 4 men died of thirst. Speaking of Buffalo Soldiers, Lieutenant Henry O. Flipper, the very first black man to graduate from West Point, who was up here chasing Comanches. About Jim Clark from Plainview, and the fact that the internet, as you and I know it, would not exist except for that man who grew up and got kicked out of school in Plainview, Texas. Billy the Kid, who we're certain came up and down Yellow House Draw, which was kind of like the interstate highway between Fort Griffin and Fort Sumner at the time. And more about that mysterious lady in blue, but my time's up, and I don't want another shorty telling me I talked too long. So I'll just say thanks for being such a kind audience. Have a great day. Keep doing great things, Lions. And God bless all of y'all.